Great. So this is our review session for last class that we've combined with a kind of general question and answer or discussion with the volunteers visiting. Um, so the last class we had on Stages of the Path on Sunday was talking about the greatness of the teachings. Why should we listen to a particular teaching is important to know before we listen to it, right? Like, what is the benefit or structure of this teaching? Why is it important? And then naturally we have more interest and confidence in studying something, you know. If I tell you the benefits of learning a particular subject, then you have an eagerness to learn it rather than just like going in and not knowing where it's leading you or why it's leading you in that direction or the quality of the teaching. Um, I think we see very similar things with like universities. They have a brochure, right? Like, why is this university great? Here's our history. Here are our teachers. Here's our structure, right? Here's our methodology. Here's our expected outcomes. So the stages of the path has a similar kind of structure in it,
Yes.
right? So um, yeah, so it's open. So if you have any questions, we can address them or respond and share some different views.
From you?
For me?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone, yeah.
I had a question which is very general. It's not about like any teachings or any lessons that we've had, but I was wondering what's kind of Buddhism's relationship with other religions? Like in what way do you relate to them and in what way do you accept them or deny them?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just say the question again, in case the microphone doesn't catch it. But what is Buddhism's relationship, their like acceptance or rejection, perhaps, of other religions? Um, and my first response is like, well, it's going to depend on the Buddhists you're talking to and the religion that they're talking about, right? Because even when we look at Buddhism, there's a whole spectrum of types of views and emphasis, ways of understanding, just like when we look at Christians. Some are very open, you know, and collaborative, and some are highly isolated, and maybe more fundamentalist in their attitudes, exclusive. Um, Generally, I say Buddhism has, if you look at the history of Buddhism, it has rather, it's like absorbed or integrated and syncretized with other religions it encounters as it moved across Asia, like from India to China, Korea, South Asia, you know. Local deities, local gods, local religions, local customs, it just integrates them. And partly this is, I say, you know, we've talked before, Buddhism doesn't have a creator deity. We deny this aspect, that there is like one ultimate creator that controls the universe, and we are subject to their will and they're eternal. So this is like one core piece that pretty much all Buddhists will share. Um, so that means any other deities or gods and spirits or beings can fit within a Buddhist cosmology from our side, right? We see them as other beings within the cycle of rebirth, the cycle of rebirth as samsara, existence, right? And they may have varying levels of power, ability, knowledge, virtue, non-virtue. So even for Buddhism, you know, Indian like Vedic deities were acknowledged, like the four heavenly kings or Brahma and Indra. You know, Buddha wasn't like, oh, you know, they're trash. This is fake. It's not real. You know, he said these are deities. You believe them. You know, they have a place within the cosmology of the world and the universe. People have relationships with them. Some people don't have relationships with them. That's fine. But for the kind of agenda or the project of Buddhism, um, it's okay to have a relationship with other deities that are virtuous because they're supporting your path and your practice, right? And they may embody some particular quality that's wholesome, right? So there are many like deities that represent generosity or kindness or patience, but we still see them as like within the cycle of rebirth and suffering, just like us. The difference is their ability and their form or body is different, right? One example I use is like you live in a city and you have a mayor, right? Okay, so the mayor, you may never meet, but you always see them like on TV or in the news. They're making decisions or having a kind of influence. They know many people. They have a lot of money, maybe, right? Or Beyonce. We all know who Beyonce is. She runs her own thing. You know, she's somewhere in the world doing whatever. We may or may not have a personal relationship with her, right? But we also may or may not have a distant kind of respect for her as an artist, right? Or as an influential person. So you can use this kind of example with deities. Deities may be uh, beings that we have a close connection and emotional feeling with, but they also may just be distant entities that are powerful in their own right and in their own sphere, and we can respect that, right? We don't have to engage and we don't have to deny. So I think this, for me, is like a way that Buddhism has been able to adjust itself to whatever religions are coming in contact with. Because individual practitioners can cultivate that. If they have a strong local faith and custom, they can continue that within a relationship to their Buddhist practice. And if they don't have that kind of custom or faith, that's also fine. It's not necessary. Uh, so I would say that's like kind of my general like bit on how Buddhists may or may not relate to deities and other religions. You will see things like, oh, I'm like a Buddhist Christian or a Christian Buddhist. This gets a little, I think when you're doing double religions, you either have to like completely change your hat, right? And be like, now I believe this worldview, and now I believe this worldview, and they may totally conflict. And then there might be a question of like, really, what is your direction or confidence or faith? Or are you just changing roles, like what are you really working towards? Um, and then there's the other case where people may be primarily Buddhist and secondarily another religion as like a supportive supplement, right? Because they grew up with it or they have like strong family ties or cultural ties. So like they go do Christmas stuff or they attend Jewish holidays, right? Because that's what their family does and that's how they participate. But it's still within their own framework, has a particular role that supports Buddhism rather than like a kind of struggle. Even talking about this creator deity issue, if you're Christian Buddhist, you at some point have to reconcile, right? That one religion saying there's an almighty, all-powerful creator, and your other faith that you're practicing entirely denies that. Other things may fully line up, right? Shared values, sure. But like one of these, you do have to kind of make a choice, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think in Buddhism, kind of like can be more open-hearted, in a way, open-minded, to embrace a lot. That's why Buddhism came to China, kind of embracing Chinese philosophy, so it became Chinese Buddhism. Went to Japan, embracing Japanese culture and became Japanese Buddhism. So to Korea or any other countries. Because Buddhism seemed like very easy to get along with a lot of cultures, backgrounds, religions. That's why, in that way, we can call like Buddhism a very harmonious belief. But is it mean that Buddhism totally the same as other religions? No, it won't be. Just like every individual can have, personal values and thinking, way of looking at the world, can live harmoniously together, but can also have different opinions. And when I say Buddhism is, for me, why Buddhism can be my choice, or the belief that I choose to follow, is because through the lens of Buddhism, I will be able to see things more clearly, not to criticize them, but to know more like know thoroughly about things. So if I have the understanding of Buddhist teachings, it will be very helpful for me to learn other philosophies or other fields in psychology, economy, or other fields. That will be easier for me. Yeah. So I think Buddhism is, for me, a very good foundation. Yeah. So with this foundation, I'll be able to learn more, to see things more clearly. Instead of calling Buddhism a religion, I would say Buddhism is the notion that to be awakened, because Buddha is awakening, right? The term of Buddha is like enlightenment or awakening. Yeah. So we can say awakenism or enlightenism or whatever it is. But this Buddhism is more like to be awakened, to see things more clearly, uh, like that. So, uh, if we talk about the same Buddhism, then the Buddhism should be like calmness, clarity, to develop insight, to see things more clearly,
Accurate,
accurately, precisely, like that. Yeah. So uh, I'm glad that my family chose this so-called belief or religion. Yeah. So I can grow up with this. And later I would be able to explore more as a monastic. And later we'll be able to come here and learn with Teacher Tang to know more about what is Buddhism. And then become my way of looking at the world. And which is very good because I will be more humble, to see things, to have more open-minded uh, look at everything. Yeah, trying to not have like self-centered point of view and try to see things with more open-hearted perspective like that. Yeah.
I mean, I have friends like I have a friend, she calls herself a Jubu,
Yeah.
because like culturally she's Jewish. Her father's like a Orthodox rabbi, like they just all the stuff. And she like, does all the holidays, she engages a lot with Judaism, but she also doesn't put it as her primary belief, right? A lot of her beliefs come out of Buddhism as well, so they integrate together. Um, and I know some others that are of this kind of character, where they may even be Buddhist first, but like they have a very strong background in another religion. Um, and so you can, when we talk about stages of the path, for example, this first scope about a higher rebirth, right? This aligns with like most religions, right? Like, most religions are looking at a higher rebirth and kind of suggesting to you to cultivate good qualities and work on your negative qualities. And this can create some conditions for a higher rebirth. And then they have, various, it depends if you believe this or say this prayer. There's all kinds of nuance. I'm very much simplifying. But we do talk about higher rebirth as a human or a god, a deity, right? Kind of heavenly realms. So all those techniques or methods from Buddhism can really support people in other religions, as another way to explain or cultivate how to develop qualities. I've encountered too, when I was in San Francisco, someone came to meditation regularly, and she was Muslim, and she was like, "Oh, Buddhism is very familiar and similar to me. It's not antagonistic to Islam." She said the values are the same. And she's like, I really appreciate that when you do meditation and you work with the mind, it's more, it's the steps are explained more, right? And she's like, usually what we got was just like, oh, just like sit and calm down, but like now we're like taking you through a process. So, you can borrow the techniques from Buddhism, right? You wouldn't call it then Buddhism, you're just borrowing methods, right? Um,
But
yeah,
if you are fully believing someone we call the Buddha,
yeah.
like the fully enlightened person, and you try to embrace every teaching he offered,
Mm.
then later I also will become that kind of person, become fully enlightened one day. Yeah. So that means I try to incorporate whatever the teaching
Mm.
and then into my blood, my bones, my life, like that. Yeah. And it's not like I kind of obey to the Buddha's order in something.
Buddhist
No,
way.
it's not like that
Yeah.
because the Buddha never, intend to kind of manipulate any people's life. Yeah. It's like just to help people to see more clearly about themselves, about the world they're in, about the future, like that.
There's that famous verse like "Come and see,"
Yeah, come and
it's
see.
like here's come and see, here's the teaching, you see for yourself, test it yourself. And this question about like is Buddhism a religion? It's forever been coming up because this idea of having a religion and being of a religion is like a Western academic perspective, right? And it's been said, like, you go into other cultures, they were not conceiving of themselves as practicing a religion. Like, this is just how life is. It's how we're engaging with the world. It's not a religious identity. You see it now, and like I use Japan as an example, but there's like another more modern history that's influencing this. But, you ask people what religion are you, and they'll say none. But then they like go regularly to all kinds of religious services and do many religious things. There's a whole thing with that, with like, cults in the 90s and people wanting to distance themselves from this word within Japan. But this is much different than like, I think in the West where people are like, what religion are you? Right? Like that's who you are, that's your identity. I had this with Tibetan monastics too in India or Nepal. They'd often say, oh, Buddhism's not a religion, it's like a science. It's a mind science. We're trying to investigate and analyze and dissect our mind and our reality, right? And they say it's not a religion, but it's not a philosophy either, right? Because they're like the way they're seeing it is we're testing and verifying from our ability, right? Um, and then, like my lay teacher said, you can practice Buddhism in many ways. So you can practice it as a religion, you can practice it as a philosophy, and you can practice it as a way of life. And some people do all three, right? And some people do one. That's your choice to make. Um, if we use a definition of religion, yeah, I mean, we're like wearing robes and like burning incense and like bowing and doing all these things, which together make up religion, but separately are also cultural expressions of respect and relating to teachers and each other. They're not necessarily like requirements from a deity, right, that we have to do to appease them, right?
Yeah, like offering, for example, you
It's all
see
the
a beautiful
food,
cloud
yeah.
in the sky. You can offer that to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Or you have a pile of leaves on the floor. You want to offer that because you think it's beautiful. Then you can offer that to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That's fine. It's not like you have to use something to offer that to show your respect. No, it's not. It's like the heart that is important. In Buddhism, it's like that.
Yeah, it's your expression of
It's
generosity,
generosity.
not like
Yeah.
a demand for a sacrifice of
Yeah, yeah,
a fruit bowl. Buddha
yeah.
demands a fruit bowl every day. It's not like this.
Yeah, and very interestingly, one Chinese scholar, he studied religions, so he tried to categorize Buddhism into different uh how to say different kinds of religions. They have like what's it theory
Theistic,
yeah,
monotheistic,
monotheist, or a lot of
polytheistic.
different categories. He tried to categorize Buddhism. But he categorized, he tried to classify them, and then there were like 9 of them already. And then he tried to put Buddhism into these 9, but no one fits. So he said like probably Buddhism should be the 10th category. And then there is a question, why we have to put that into certain category?
So academia.
Yeah, that's the academia thing, So that's the type
Good job.
That's the Buddhism type of religion. But what is Buddhism type of religion? The Buddhism itself is a type, and which to categorize, no, it is itself is self-categorized religion. And then why you categorize it into the religion? Probably you just don't fit, so you have to create one to fit it. Yeah. So we just look at this as a very good teaching that you can follow and will help you to become better and better. Yeah. If you can really follow the steps of these so-called stages of the path to enlightenment, and then that just work. Yeah. Very good. Very well. Yeah. So like that. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I add on to it? Because You also said that Buddhism is very harmonious with the other cultures in general. So I always ask myself, so what is or can you really define the relationship between Buddhism and Taoism, for example? And also another question is Confucianism, because maybe this is based on my misconceptions about Confucianism, because in my head it's very strict. It's this book of laws almost, and it's very based on obedience, but maybe I don't know as much. So it almost seems like a contradiction to Buddhism to me sometimes. Maybe
Okay.
you can solve that for me.
Very well, you want to
If you
repeat
can,
it? No,
okay.
repeat the question.
So about harmony with other religions and how like Taoism might play into that, or Confucianism, which Confucianism too seems very strict with like many rules that are not changing, and as you said, maybe based on a misconception, all about like a kind of obedience. I'm assuming there's like a negative tinge to that obedience question, but it seems like this is a contradiction for you with Buddhism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if Teacher Davison can solve this for you.
Well, okay, let's I will look at this in like Chinese scholar from Qing Dynasty. Okay, probably it's not far from now. 17 centuries later afterward, all these like Qing Dynasty. So during the time, there was a scholar who looked at these three philosophies, Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, like three philosophies in China. And he said that they are all trying to explain the universe, okay, the universal truth, okay. So we can simply divide into two parts. One is worldly philosophy. One is more supramundane philosophy, transcendental philosophy. Okay, so we have this worldly philosophy, Confucianism, Taoism, or Buddhism. They all say something about these. But Confucianism talk about the worldly views a lot, a more easy to follow. Their instructions in Confucianism, easy to follow. When talking about worldly values and everything, how to cope with relationships with different people, Confucianism has good instructions, more easy to follow. But for Taoism, a little bit, but not too much, unworldly, but a little bit about transcendental part of the universe. Yeah. So they explain something. Only like 5,000 words in this Tao Te Ching in Taoism. Because when we talk about Confucianism, we have to go back to Confucius ideas. That means the analects, Confucian analects. So through that book, we will be able to know clearly what is Confucianism. So when talking about Taoism, please go back to Lao Tzu, his Tao Te Ching. And to talk about Taoism, he didn't actually talk about too much about the worldly philosophy, but more like, but mostly within that 5,000 words, more on this the super mundane or transcendental point of view. As for Buddhism, worldly, yes, a bit, very close to Confucianism in some ways, but more on transcendental philosophy. Yeah. It's like another half. If you divide into two half, right? 50-50%. Confucianism covered the 50% very like entirely. Yeah. And probably 10% or 20 about this transcendental part you can find in Confucian Alex or the Book of Change, I Ching, the Book of Change. In Taoism, from Lao Tzu's point of view, he covered probably 25% or 30% of this worldly philosophy. And also covered probably 25 to 30% of this transcendental philosophy. Somehow Buddhism can cover almost everything. Yeah, that's just Qing Qing Dynasty Chinese scholar said. I think it's very accurate. So when we look at Confucianism, please go to look at this text, the Confucian Analects, because they are 498 passages, all said, no, mostly said by Confucius. Yeah, they're like records of all Confucius teachings. Yeah, you look at the text, then you will see more of his ideas. Because when we talk about Confucianism in general, it includes Neo-Confucianism and future development of Confucianism, and some kind of like relationship between Chinese politics, like hierarchical point of view, looking at this emperors and obedience, relating to that, to people always obey to the emperor, like that. But no, it's not Confucius' idea. If you look at Confucian Analects, you will know that. As for Taoism, people say like more like transcendental. No, it says a lot about how to be a leader in Lao Tzu, because we covered halfway through already on our YouTube channel. Teacher Tang is now teaching. So if you look at this text carefully, within that 5,000 words, a lot of them talking about leadership. That's worldly. That's not transcendental. Yeah. So basically, we talk about Lao Tzu's point more when talking about transcendental part, also more like through the lens of this worldly view about the nature. You observe the nature well, the causes and conditions and the results, more. Like how, this kind of like circulation or, from spring, summer, autumn, winter seasons, seasons changing and everything, it has its like nature course. Yeah, how it functions. There is a way that, there is a principle within it. You observe it, you will figure it out. Yeah, like that. That's more like Lao Tzu's point of view. But beyond this, can you see that there is also a bigger principle? Yeah, he is trying to kind of like bringing people through his eyes to see that part of the universe. Okay, but in Buddhism, okay, let's say what we can observe, that's like physical world that we can understand, right? We can comprehend through our eyes, through our senses. But this is the physical world that we can comprehend. But how about beyond that? So Buddhism is more like to tell you through the eyes of all these enlightened beings, like the Buddha, who have seen all these, in the whole spectrum. So he will be able to tell you the other half more completely. So when we talk about like enter into this Madhyamika, there is a text talking about the middle way, but within that text, it says a lot about once you attain this like profound meditative absorption to see the emptiness yourself. That's the very basic point to start with. That's the foundation already. You just stand on that. So see the emptiness, that's the first step. And then beyond that, there are 10 main stages for you to work on. Yeah. So in Buddhism, explain them in detail, how you can work on those, to attain all these transcendental stages yourself, through the instructions and guidance of the teachings of the Buddha, like that. So, like, simply put, how about life after death? In Buddhism, it says a lot about life after death in detail. Like, what is heaven? Some of the heavens in Buddhism, you can find a lot of descriptions. How about Pure Land, the Buddha's land? There are many descriptions, can describe in detail that you can find in Buddhist teachings. How about the universe? Well, how about how to describe the universe? You can find a lot in Buddhism. Yeah. Compare with other religions or other philosophies, they can explain in fully. And charmly part is like in Buddhism, they all related to each other. Yeah. And you can explain, you can actually there will be no contradictory you can find, especially through the stages of the path of enlightenment, through this text. Will be more in line. There is no contradictory. Yeah. And then so you can have a very clear picture of what it's like in the universe. Yeah. So
But in Confucianism, you don't get this.
but in Confucianism,
Doesn't talk about
yeah,
this.
it's like probably like 20%, 25%. A lot of text, a lot of this classics been destroyed by past emperors in China. All these strange emperors, they destroy a lot of texts. Yeah. So we can only have all these texts remain right now to show us what is so-called Confucianism. Yeah, which is already, been kind of like destroyed. A lot of it.
When you look at early texts, there's more alignment than when you look at later developments, like looking at Confucianism from 500 years ago, right? Maybe what was going on politically and socially is going to kind of color the way Confucianism actually is practiced and how it relates to Buddhism. And even with Taoism, there were different periods where Taoists and Buddhists were like competing, for court or imperial favor or, social dominance. I think some of those things,
Yeah.
Influence. There's a good times and bad times, even within
Yeah. Some emperors will burn all the
yeah.
sutras, Buddhist scriptures. Some of the emperors will burn all these Confucian scriptures.
I think when we talk about harmony, within the doctrine, there's harmony, but then within the people, there is not harmony, right? Right. Just like we look at Christianity, we're like, oh, Jesus is gospel, great stuff, nice guy. I'm behind a lot of it, good values. But then how people enact that, right, can be very different, right? What they say they ascribe to versus what they then do, right? So like I know, like I said, other people from I know Catholic nuns that are like love Buddhists, love being in Buddhist dialogue, love staying at Buddhist temples, lots of Buddhist friends, Buddhism, yay, I'm also Catholic, but there's not a conflict for them because they see that maybe our way of conceiving this long distance vision is different, but where we are now in the world that we're in and what we're dealing with day to day, right, is very much the same. We're still struggling with social issues the same. We still under the same government, the same economical situation. We're experiencing it a little differently, but the core human values are similar. So they don't have to have a conflict there. But it's when we get into the doctrinal, these certain kind of deeper views that there can be,
But I think Jay Tsongkhapa, who explained so well already, through his commentaries, we'll be able to embrace all different philosophies within Buddhism. Yeah, that's why we study these stages on the path to enlightenment, because this particular text will help us to attain that.
It's a structure. I think that's very important. Like that's the main point is like if you're going to learn something, you need a structure. Why do we say then for religion we don't need that? Right? Like for internal transformation, I was just like whatever I feel today, and then like floating around, without any sort of container for it. So I think thinking like stages of the path or, some other systems out there might provide a structured approach. I think we were talking before about theologians versus like average religious people that go to like church. Theologians often have a more structured and critical approach to what they're doing, and maybe even sometimes more open-minded, because they're usually looking at what they're doing through a more clear like outline and framework, and they're able to critique it, versus the average person may be like, oh, I can't, if I critique, that means I'm failing at my religion somehow. There's some sort of guilt or question mark or doubt, like self-doubt, not like good doubt, but self-doubt to doing that. Um, Versus like the Tibetan traditions or like Indian, debate systems, they're very much into critique, right? And being able to logically explain your point of view and defend your stance, and if it doesn't hold up, that doesn't hold up, right? We should abandon, this view. They give this example of when they would have these massive debates, right? Like, you're a spiritual leader of a group and I'm one, and we have a debate and I lose, right? Me and all my people, we join your group. We convert over. We follow you, right?
Well, like
Yeah,
most of the majority
yeah,
disciples of the Buddha, yeah, they came from other beliefs. Yeah. Because they, after debate
for
or after
days, you could go for
discussion,
days, debate for
yeah,
days.
yeah, they debate for days, and then, okay, we just follow you. Everyone join the Buddha,
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, so 1,000 of people join Buddha, like that. It's so you can say in that way, like more open-minded, to accept change. It's not like, okay, this is my standpoint, I will never change my standpoint. It's not like that. It's like, okay, probably you can explain better. Yeah, I think, there is nothing to debate with because it's quite clear. So I just follow you, like that. I think that's very, I'll say, in a way,
Mhm.
more open. Is that
It seems, I mean, for me, that seems more practical and like realistic.
yeah,
You know,
realistic? Which restaurant
uh,
is good? Compare, and then this one is good, with more on the menu. Probably this
yeah.
is good, with Indian food and Chinese food and Korean food, everything you can find from the restaurant. So let's go. Let's go that one. Yeah. More like that, probably. Yeah. But it's not like it's how to say it's not like a grocery store. Buddhism is a bigger grocery store. You can find everything. It's more like uh, more consistency, and we'll be able to explain things more clearly, and follow instructions will be easier to apply to our daily lives, like that. Yeah.
It it can, it has a potential. It also has a potential for people to just like float around and pick and choose and go years without feeling like they learned or developed anything. And then they can question like, why did Buddhism fail me? My life
Yeah.
is the same.
Which is the
Well,
law.
this is not necessarily the fault of Buddhism,
Yeah.
right? It's the fault of how we learn and um, the approach we have. That's why yesterday we were talking about, teacher Davison was saying the best blessing, right, is having teachers, right? Because sometimes people go 10 years randomly studying and trying to make sense of things, and then coming up with all kinds of conflicts or wondering why their life is the same, their mind is the same, and they're hitting the same problems because they've never encountered teachers or co-practitioners. We bring this up all the time here too, that everyone can be a teacher, right? And this role as a teacher will change. That's not something like, you get the title and you're always the teacher all the time. Yeah.
Hmm.
So how does that solve your doubt and the seeming conflict between Buddhism and Confucianism?
No, I just
More
I
questions.
think yeah, even more, but I have to structure things
I think
first.
to that point about obedience, because I was asking about
Yeah.
this, it was explained that in different times that was emphasized more and interpreted in different ways, right? And one of the ones that came up recently in some other discussions with folks was, that Buddhism, this idea of filial piety, like respect for
Mm.
parents, and obedience to parents, is a Confucian slash Chinese culture thing that kind of like infected Buddhism and that it doesn't exist in Buddhism. But this is not true because you find earlier sutras that are talking all about respecting parents and elders and teachers and paying respect to ancestors, that have passed on as hungry ghosts or whatnot. And even these ideas about seeing all sentient beings as like your mother or your brother and your sister, these are all dealing with filial piety. And the best way to repay sentient beings who have been your parents is to become a Buddha, right? So these ideas were already present. I think what they're pointing at when they're saying the issues with obedience or filial piety is not the most wholesome expression of those, but the unwholesome expression of them that have been labeled as representative of Confucianism or Chinese culture, where like people I know, like either Asian American or Asia coming to the US, are like, oh yeah, my parents would just be like, if I don't do what they say, I'm a bad child and I'm not expressing filial piety and I'm not doing my duty as a child, and I was like, I don't think that's really filial piety,
Yeah, that's not.
like the respect has to go both ways. Like you're not a child just because you were born by parents, right? You're not a parent just because you had a child, right? This is not always true. Some people have kids and don't want them, so they're not parents. Um, just like we maybe say, you're born a human, but are you acting like a human, right? Are you acting like animal? Are you acting like hungry ghost, right? Are you acting like helping, right? There's many ways you can behave. It's not just what your body is, right? So my understanding from like ULA, and please correct me,
Yes.
we talk about a human rebirth, but then are you actually a human, right? Are you living with human qualities? Are you expressing the best of your humanity, right? Um, because when we look at animals, they just kind of go where there's food and a place to sleep and a place to poop and like procreate. That's kind of like majority of animal concerns is like safety, physical safety and comfort. Um, and sometimes we act like this too, right? That becomes our priority is our safety and stability and comfort. And then when that's taken care of, it's much easier to focus on other internal qualities. So my understanding with like Confucianism is how do we deal with the material physical world, right? So we have that security and comfort, and then we can focus on developing other qualities as well, right? And like achieve other more elevated goals too.
Hmm. Yeah, Confucius' disciple used to ask Confucius, like, I always obey to my parents, then I'm a good person, right? Confucius said, what are you talking about? It's not like that. He said that if you have several friends, to give you advice, that makes you a good person, because they will just show you what are the right things to do. Yeah, then it's good. You have more chance to become a good person. If you are a father, you have children to give you advices. That will make you a good person as well. So, as parents should listen to children sometimes to learn from them. Yeah, that means so it's not like always obedient.
Always up,
Yeah, it's not like always the parents are right. No, it's not like that. So we go back to the Confucius texts, then you will know more about what his idea when talking about filial piety or loyalty or all other these topics. You will know more. Like for example, there is one criteria in Confucianism called righteousness. But when we learn this word, we immediately have some kind of like understanding of this definition. But in Confucianism, this is very hard. It's like how to say like the middle way. It's hard. It's a middle way. The middle way, okay, this table here is the middle. How about this room? Then probably here's the middle. How about this city? Where's the middle? How about this planet? How about the universe? The middle can be different. The suitable way, so-called the middle way. Yeah. So when we talk about righteousness, we are finding that appropriate or more, how to say, coping with this present situation, what is right to do. So there is actually hard to find a criteria.
It's not just universal, like this kind of behavior is the righteous behavior. And if you're not doing it, you're not righteous.
So that's the definition of Confucius. about righteousness. So what is righteousness?
So
To be harmonized. You know, when you can create that kind of harmony, then that's righteousness. And that's the only criteria you should be care about. So it's, in a way, it is kind of like a criteria, but it's also very hard to grasp, see. And this is why we have to develop wisdom, right? Through our life, you know, through years of cultivation to find out, yeah, what will be those right things to do. Yeah. This is not easy to figure out. But of course, it will be easy to figure out if we put a lot of effort into, you know, finding that, you know. So through the teachings, you know, through all these wise people, their teachings, or like enlightened beings, you know, their teachings, we'll be able to know more.
I think the same is true of obedience, that it's not just like whatever you say, I must do, or I have to do it in order to win your approval and be a good person, right? That there's a much more nuance to that. But I think things like righteousness or obedience or filial piety often get reduced down to their meaning and then used in really toxic ways to control other people. And then this gets called Confucianism, right?
So like loyalty, for example, loyal in Chinese is like middle heart, the word middle heart, middle way, the same. So you have to find this middle path or the right way to, like, definition. Like if you are saying something, you have to be careful with the words definition, definition of the words, and then you construct them. What is the meaning that you're trying to tell people, present to people, like that. So that's loyal. Be loyal with your words. Be loyal with your status, probably, what you're like you are in this position to do your own job. You focus on your work, right? You be loyal with whatever your responsibility, for example, like that. So to talk about loyalty is not like blindly loyal. For Confucius himself, the same. When the state governor did something wrong, he did what he should do at the time as someone who helping, assisting the governor. He was working in the government at the time, state government. He offered his advices 3 times. They didn't accept. Confucius decided to go with his disciples. So they left the state. They left. When you disagree, you left. You try your best to correct them, but if they don't listen, then you left. You find someone who will be willing to listen and do the right thing, and you go.
Is this disloyal?
Is that disloyal? No, it's not disloyal. It's loyal to the meaning or to the just how to say the middle way. Yeah, you're loyal to the middle way, to the so-called the righteousness. So it's very different.
Loyalty too means, oh, whatever I do, you'll be there, right? You won't oppose, right, or reject. They think this is like a kind of loyalty as well. Right?
Yeah.
There's different interpretations.
Yeah. So I think from that point, Confucianism, there are many in common to like Buddhism. They have a lot of shared views. Yeah. You have a question?
Not anything specific.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's do the dedication then.
Yeah. More questions? No. Okay, let's just
my questions.
Another one. Another burning question.
Not a burning.
Okay.
And then then we can talk later. Yes.
May the merit gained from this practice adorn the Buddha's Pure Land. May repay the kindness of parents, sentient beings, teachers, and the triple gem from above. Relieve the suffering of those in the hell, hungry ghosts, and animal realms below. May those who see or hear of this practice generate the aspiration for ultimate enlightenment. When this life ends, may we be born together in the land of ultimate bliss. We pray to all Buddhas of the 10 directions, past, present, and future, to all Bodhisattvas and Mahasattvas, Mahaprajna Paramita. Thank you.
You. Very well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.